So Hayley speaking, welcome to our event on designing with dignity. We're Australian Network on Disability, and before we begin, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of Australia and their continuing connection to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to the people, the cultures and the elders past and present. I'm on the land of the Gadigal people, but acknowledge that there will be people on different lands. So acknowledging the different lands that people are on, and also extending that respect to anyone who identifies as First Nations on the call today.
Tom speaking. Thanks, Hayley. We'd also like to extend and acknowledge people, are welcome to acknowledge people with a disability too. We acknowledge anyone on this call who has a disability, and we want to flag everything that we do is for you, and nothing about you without you. So thank you for joining us today. And yeah, we're really excited to have a conversation about dignified access and user experience.
Emma here. I'd like to introduce Australian Network on Disability. Our vision and purpose. We have a vision of a disability confident Australia. We are the peak body for disability in employment in business, and we support organisations to build employer capability and be the employer voice to government, industry and community to achieve the inclusion of people with disability.
Tom speaking. Thanks, Emma. So we thought we'd just start off by giving a quick snapshot on disability in Australia. Given the time that we've got as well, we can't go in a huge amount of detail. We could spend hours discussing all of the things we're going to talk to today, but given the time frame, we just wanted to give a bit of a scene set, and we'll start off with you, Hayley, I think.
Yep. So Hayley speaking. So these are based on the statistics from the 2018 census by the Australian Bureau of Statistics. So around 17.7% of the population has disability. There's 2.3 million carers in Australia. Most disability is non-physical and non-visible, and 45% of Australians experience mental illness. And so something to think about with that is that is reported disability mental health conditions, and also those statistics are also pre-COVID as well. So I'll hand over to Tom to go into more stats.
Tom speaking. Thanks, Hayley. And I guess as well, that previous slide just shows how important to consider access and good design is, considering the number of people it affects and supports. And in relation to that as well, and again, through the ABS, as we age, as we get older, there's a more likelihood of us acquiring a disability, and the prevalence of disability rate increases with age. So by the time we reach 75, it's 50-50. And certainly someone has said, disability is certainly the only club that we're all guaranteed to join. So when we're talking about disability confidence today, through dignified design, again, we're really having a conversation about everyone in Australia and about how through disability confidence and through great design, we can improve everyone's lives and create opportunities for all. So yeah, we're really excited to be here and talk to dignified design and user experience. Hayley, do you want to introduce this notion of persona spectrum?
Yeah. Hayley speaking, absolutely. So with the persona spectrum, when we look at that, we can see how where we design for accessibility will benefit everyone. So on the slide, there are different health conditions and disability, and showing that so something where accessibility is embedded to support vision would benefit people who are blind, but also with a temporary condition such as a cataract. but then also situational as a distracted person. And one thing I've heard with the persona spectrum is that if you design for the minority, you're going to design for everyone. So the reason why we've shared this is just the importance of embedding that accessibility, which will benefit everyone. One for me that always benefits is automatic opening doors. They can benefit people who may be sort of carrying a child or carrying boxes, etc., but then can also benefit people who may not have the strength to be able to open weighted doors as well.
Tom speaking. Thanks for that, Hayley. And yeah, I think that automated door is something that might come up a bit later in our conversation, but certainly it's a great design just to benefit everyone. So dignified access, and we're going to talk more about this as we have a conversation and answer some questions. I think, yeah, the key thing is around, and the piece that I really like, is a participation of people experiencing a disability as natural and expected. That means we provide a dignified experience, and we can be compliant, we can talk to minimum standards, but really even by hitting those minimum standards, it might not be a dignified experience. We'll get into that a bit later, but yeah, dignified access for all is certainly around making making independent access to premises and goods for everyone, equitable, fair, natural, expected, and certainly a place where people feel at ease, safe and connected. And for me, that talks to a culture and beyond the physical environment, which again comes in when Hayley, if you want to talk to user experience, fits in nicely there.
Yeah. Hayley speaking. Thank you so much for that. So when we talk about the design for dignity as well, we do talk about going beyond compliance. And so the work I do is really working with people with disability to understand sort of like their interaction within a space. So thinking about vision. So what tasks or requirements are there for our use of vision, hearing, thinking, communication, mobility, so how we're able to move around the space, also our reach and stretch, and also our dexterity. But also thinking about the types of interaction in a space as well. So often we will do different types of reviews, which will be based on customers who may only go into a space for a short period of time and less often, compared to employees who will be interacting in the space more often and may have be engaging in different tasks, which may require more cognitive load or more reach and stretch, etc., depending on the type of role that they're engaging in.
Emma here. Thank you so much for setting the scene, Hayley and Tom. I'm just going to turn off our slides and take a moment to actually introduce ourselves. So now that we've set the scene for disability in Australia and the reason why we're doing this, I have the opportunity to introduce myself. My name is Emma Henningsen. I'm the head of consulting here at Australian Network on Disability. I am a dark blonde haired woman with a short bob, wearing a yellow top and glasses, and I'm very happy to be here. I'm joined by my colleagues and team members, Hayley Brooks and Tom Bevan. I'll give them a moment to introduce themselves, and then we're going to jump into some questions that we've had asked across more broadly by members of our team and by members of our organisation.
Hayley, would you like to start?
Oh, Hayley speaking. Yeah, I'm happy to start. So I'm Hayley Brooks. So I am a Caucasian female. I have sort of brown rimmed, square rimmed glasses on, and I'm wearing my sunflower lanyard. I am a person with a non-visible disability.
Thanks, Hayley. Thanks for sharing too. Tom speaking. So I'm Tom Bevan. I'm the Dignified Access Lead as part of A&D's consulting team. I am, I'd say, middle-aged man with cropped hair, blue glasses, and I'm wearing a white shirt with a grey jacket. Really excited to be here. International Day of People with Disabilities on December the 3rd. And this is such a great topic, Emma, to be talking to. Let's get into it. Let's ask us some hard questions.
Emma here. Thank you, team. First question. Isn't it enough to make a building accessible? Why do we need to go beyond the building code and access standards?
Thanks, Emma. Tom here. Well, isn't it enough? So the question is, isn't it enough to make a building accessible? Why do we need to go beyond the code and standards? Well, my work, and I think I just calculated, I looked at about over 100 different floors now over the last 12 months. And my work is all about getting into the front door. You know, if we're going to go to work, we need to be able to get into work. But it's not, you know, that's not where things stop. Minimum isn't good enough. Compliance isn't good enough. So whilst we can be compliant and tick a box, yeah, that isn't enough, simply because, you know, if you've got a situation where you do have stepped entry, you know, we'd love not to have stepped entry, you need a ramp to be compliant. And quite often in design, that ramp might have been an afterthought. So it's around the back of a building, through the car park, past the bins. And of course, two different users having two different experiences like that. One is dignified, one is expected. The other's not. You know, going past the bins to go to work is just not on. So it's not just good enough to make a building accessible. You have to consider how and what that experience is of those users. We've also got code, building code, and the standards. And the building code and standards, you know, it's based on really old data from the 80s. We talked about how, as we age, the prevalence of disability increases. And also we know, I mean, access for younger people is hard as well, but the data was based on a cohort of from 18 to 60. So it's missing a large amount of people in terms of building accessibility standards today. And you know what, as well, and Hayley, I think, is going to be able to talk to this a lot better than I can. You know, we understand so much more about disability nowadays as well. We talk about invisible disabilities, mental health, you know, stigma, barriers, etc. as well. Thankfully, now we're unpacking that a lot more, we're understanding more of our users, and therefore we need to ask more of our access standards and ask more of our access considerations. So it is so important to go beyond code and standards. Minimum's never good enough, and compliance doesn't equal dignity. So that's the way I see it. Hayley, I'm sure you've got something to say as well.
Yeah, Hayley speaking. Thank you so much. And I forgot to also say I'm the customer and employee experience lead. So sorry about that, everyone. So my role is where I facilitate listening sessions with people with disability to help embed accessibility in the design of products and services. So sorry, I didn't allude to that when I introduced myself. But yeah, when you're thinking about code as well, it doesn't think about the experience of people within the space, particularly from the sensory experience. So even like when we're working in an office, where people are working. So I can speak from my own lived experience that I can't work in really busy and loud environments. I need a quieter space with lower lighting, where some people really thrive in those environments. And similar with when we're looking in shopping spaces, etc. We've seen the introduction with some organisations looking at quiet hours, which reduce the sound and noise within the environment, but also clutter. How many people are in the area can also impact the way people are able to enjoy the space and actually be able to thrive and do what they do what they need to do in that environment as well.
Emma here. I love that response. I do have some concerns, I think, when you say that it's really old data from the 80s, Tom, partly because that's concerning that the data is so old, but also because it's not that old. Please don't say the 80s is that old. I also really I quite like the language of compliance doesn't equal dignity. And I think that's really something that we're going to be holding on to during the course of this conversation, and something that we can hold on to as we engage and make our workplaces more accessible for people with disability. I know that you've already kind of begun to touch on this, Hayley. What are the most common barriers that you find in this space?
Yeah, Hayley speaking, a great question, and sort of thinking of the overarching barrier I see is sort of that aesthetics. So what things look like and wanting to make things look really sort of fashionable and nice versus accessibility, and actually, is it suitable for people? So that's one thing I see time and again, where there might be sort of seating which looks really cool. It's got these funky sort of wooden facades, etc., on them, but they're really uncomfortable. And when you actually talk to people on how long or if you'd be able to sit on those seats, they're actually not suitable, and people can't either sort of get down or up from the seats, or they don't have the back support that they require. So yeah, that accessibility versus aesthetics is something I see. But what that comes down to really is that the lived experience of people with disability hasn't been embedded from the beginning, because those things would have been picked up earlier on to avoid those unsuitable solutions that have been designed. And Tom, given that you do a lot of dignified access reviews, you could probably talk to more of those examples then that you see in the environment.
Thanks, Hayley. Look, yeah, I've seen a few barriers. Just would like to talk to the point that I was born in the 70s, so please don't hold the 80s comment against me. But no, look, certainly, I mean, the biggest thing, or one of the most common things, and you've already touched on this, is doors, manual doors. I love going to a review where there aren't any doors. Get rid of doors. But manual doors, especially in bathrooms, where automated doors just make access so easy. And again, automation of things also supports many other users. Like you said, if I'm holding a box of files and I'm walking through a door, I can't, or I've got my lunch or I'm on my phone, an accessible door will help, or an automated door would help. I think certainly in a work environment, again, after COVID, we're seeing this hybrid space, or hybrid working model, which we're all getting used to still. Having areas within an organization, or not having areas where we can regulate, where like maybe a well-being room, or for me, with my anxiety, as a sensory room where I can go and regulate myself. So it's not necessarily a barrier that exists, it's something that doesn't exist that would improve people's experience or staff's experience. And again, you've touched on it, sensory understanding. And again, we're through, I think, some great work that many organizations and people are doing across Australia in terms of disability advocacy. Understanding sensory needs is becoming much more prevalent, because we're knocking down stigma and knocking down those kind of barriers to talk about what we need. But yeah, I love an automated door, and I would say that's probably like one of the most common barriers. But thinking again, how do we use a space? So for me, the work that we do, we look at it from the start. How do we know we're in the right building or the right spot? How do we get inside? How do we circulate around? And then how do we do our job? What are the things that we need to do our job? Obviously, there's bathrooms, etc. But looking at those elements and considering each one uniquely, we can then understand what are those barriers and really unpack them.
Emma here. Thank you so much, Tom and Hayley. I think that idea that it's not just about identifying barriers, but it's also about being able to identify enhancements. We spend a huge portion of our working life, a huge portion of our daily lives in the workplace. So making sure that people are able to have a really positive and dignified user experience is just incredibly valuable.
Absolutely.
Question number 3. What frameworks or research methods do you use to conduct your user experience and dignified access reviews?
Thanks, Emma. Tom speaking here. Look, I'm going to jump on that one because from my work as Dignified Access Lead, I can talk to that quite quickly. So we've, at Australian Network on Disability, we have Dignified Access Guidelines. So I think in around about 2015, a lot of work was done around, what does dignified access look like? And actually just recently, I was lucky enough to review a building where that research was done. And I was so excited and so happy because the building or the floors that I looked at were just teeming with amazing accessible features and really leading with access. And whilst it was about disability as well, it was just such a incredible environment. And also, tested whether our dignity guidelines that we have and created still stand, and they really do. So the dignified access guidelines for us at A&D is really crucial to the framework of work that I do. But I would like to add as well, one of the things over the last 12 months that I've experienced as well is that at each touch point, each member that we've worked with, we've learned more and understood more. Hayley, you talked about barriers, of seeing new barriers. And what I would like to flag is our framework, whilst it's there and it's it's definitive, it's being added to as well with each user experience sort of touch point we get, we can add to that framework, and that's incredible because it's growing, and of course that'll increase access, but also support better outcomes for people in the future. But Hayley, I think the work that you do especially has got significant guidelines or significant methods.
Yeah, Hayley speaking, and I guess my work is with people with disability, and often, and even in my sort of own work and separately as a person with lived experience, that I have been involved in market research, etc., in the past that hasn't used accessible research methods. So we really do embed that in the work that we're doing. So ensuring people are aware of what we're asking them to do. So we will work quite closely with a member to understand what the environment is like, what areas of a building, how far people may be walking, so that then when we're recruiting people to be part of the project, we're giving them an overview of what participation looks like and then asking them if they have any adjustments so that they can participate. So some of the adjustments we provide is sort of Auslan interpreters, providing questions beforehand, booking and having available quiet rooms which people are able to go to if they need a break, and sort of offering the cost of transport if people need it, and also if we're paying for support workers as well. The other thing that we really do as well is we really take a social model of disability approach and empower people when we're working with people. And like I have done training in design, and within that, within design frameworks, often it's spoken about empathy. But the thing we have to be really careful about that is when you sort of empathize with people, you can sometimes go into a little bit of a charity model and feeling sorry for people. So we actually embed the social model of disability, which is looking at it's the barriers in society and the environment that is creating the barriers for the person, and the people are disabled by the environment. And so what happens is that when we are using that empathy with people, we're actually looking at, okay, well, look at this environment. No wonder people may have barriers in the environment. And then lastly, because I could talk about this all day, is just ensuring that we have trauma-informed approaches as well. We have just had the Disability Royal Commission, so and it goes back to that accessible methods that we're working with people, just ensuring that we don't traumatise people in the process. So we will work with members to limit the amount of people who are coming and observing people when they're doing reviews, that we don't have any photography or sort of recording of any people. We make sure people with disability are paid for their time, because people are sharing their expertise, and we also allow people to withdraw and gain informed consent. So there's too much to talk about with what we go through, but we really do embed that lens of trauma as well, just so that people are empowered rather than traumatized through the process.
Tom speaking. Yeah, Hayley, thank you so much. I think I just want to underline here the social model is hugely significant. For me, it's just a key takeaway. It's not the individual, it's our environment. Let's look at the environment and let's talk to the individuals to find out what they need, and let's adjust the environment accordingly. From my perspective, that's a broad stroke in terms of the work that I do in premises, and from yours, Hayley, it's kind of really understanding that what each individual needs and learning from that. And again, trauma informed, that wraparound as well is huge. I've people with a disability, have had really bad experiences, lived experiences, and so for them to share is such a huge deal as well, because often they're not given that opportunity. But I also think as well, people intrinsically just get used to what they get used to a situation and not consider what they really need. I'll just make do. So again, the work that you do and having a framework around it so that we can support people to really articulate their needs is hugely significant. And I appreciate it.
Emma here. Thanks both. It's very much around embedding the voice of people with disability in the design of these sessions, of these walkthroughs, of these reviews, and supporting them to have that voice. It's incredibly powerful, really incredibly powerful. How much will it cost though? So it's fabulous to engage and include people with disability, and necessary for us to do this. And it's necessary for organisations to drive accessibility within their businesses. What is the potential impact on a project budget when you're co-designing and you're delivering for accessibility?
Hayley, I think I'll start with this one. Sorry, how much will it cost, Emma, was the question. And it's like, well, how much will it cost if you don't do it? And what are those costs? Because they're invisible too. I'm sure Hayley will jump in on that as well. But my key area is the cost to make adjustments in terms of the building. And a lot of times it's considered, we're going to have to, we're going to have to make large sort of capital works. And the truth is, you can look at processes as well for solutions. So it doesn't always have to be, redesign the building, or at least not all the time. So, and there are there are small things that we can do as well. So I guess, look, cost is a huge part of making the change, but if you consider the design at the front end, then you're less likely going to have to retrofit. And I think accessible doors for bathrooms, that's something that I see a lot of. If you'd consider that up front, you probably wouldn't need to pay so much down the track. What else do you think, Hayley?
Hayley speaking. Thank you so much for that share. And yeah, definitely thinking about, if we don't do it, what is it going to cost? So I did prepare some stats for today. So there's some great research that was done in the UK, which we're actually going to be doing our own customer experience research at Australian Network on Disability. But 58% of people with disabilities say how businesses treat them affect the shopping habits of family and friends. So just thinking about that reputational risk, when you don't embed accessibility, it can really impact sort of revenue. And then when you think about, if you don't embed the accessibility from the beginning, there is that reputational risk, can also lead to retrofit costs. And I don't have any specific sort of costs for the dollar amount, but they can be significant when you also think about the like the resources you've already put into the initial design. The other thing to really think about as well is risk. And so in the 2021 stats from the Australian Human Rights Commission, 69% of complaints relating to goods and services related to disability discrimination. So there's a real legal risk for organisations when they don't embed that accessibility. But then going to the project itself, one of the things I noticed is that sort of embedding that accessibility isn't done from the beginning. And something that we do here at Australian Network on Disability, and I've done in previous roles, is that when we're scoping projects, we always set aside an accessibility budget. And so within that, that's looking at the cost to support any adjustments that people with disability may require. And also payment for people with disability, because that is something that is often left out, and then there's not enough budget to pay people, and we can't expect people with disability to offer their expertise for free. And then the other thing to talk about as a resource is time as well. So often projects don't have embedded the time to do that consultation. So doing that sort of user research to understand what the current experience is, and then embedding additional time for prototyping and implementation. And so the risk is that things can be done really quickly and not actually getting that comprehensive understanding of people's experience to be able to embed that accessibility, and also going back to people and showing them what you've done as a result of their feedback. And are we understanding correct? Is this what you envisage? Is this what's needed to support accessibility?
So, Tom speaking, that's such a good answer, Hayley. And that return on investment, though, that investment into user experience co-design, it is unquantifiable. But when you've got an environment that suits and supports people's needs, you've already hired the best. Now as well, you're meeting additional needs. They're going to be thriving in place. That return to any organization, you can't put a dollar value on it, but it's priceless. And certainly I think with an A&D, we're lucky as an organization to walk the walk, and we've experienced that ourselves. But the cost up front is more if you don't do it. That it's the cost to the organization later, and it's more than just retrofitting. But yeah, that's such a good answer.
Emma here, a really fabulous response both. I think it's articulating the fact that one, people with disability, that conversation and that inclusion needs to be upfront. They need to be paid for their experience, and that the people, as a woman with disability, I am definitely a part of that 58% of people that would cajole and press on my friends and family to not shop at certain places based on an experience that I've had. So really wanting to make sure that we're not being part of that that problem, causing those kind of barriers, and then thus reducing our revenue as organisations.
Sorry, Emma, just wanted to add to that as well. I mean, Hayley made that point early on where we've got statistics there that look at invisible disability too. And it's a question I often get asked from members as well. And sorry, it's less a question, it's an observation. All organizations will have people with disability in them now, which is why it's hugely important to consider this, because you've got staff members with a disability who perhaps don't, again, due to stigma, barriers, all sorts of things, haven't shared So you'll be supporting your own staff immediately, and the benefits are huge. And for me, again, whilst I work in a physical environment and specialize in that, it's the culture that creates that trust. And that's again where you can't put a dollar value on that. When you create such an environment, then again, people will thrive in place.
Emma here. Thank you for that, Tom. I think there's a real, I feel like we could be talking about this for hours. We could sit down and have a full session, but unfortunately we only have 45 minutes. So I'm going to ask one final question before we close for the morning. How do you prevent this from being a tick the box exercise? So organisations undertake these processes, they undertake a user experience review, they do a dignified access review, they understand, they've got their report in hand. The organisation can say, we've done it, we've done the review, but then nothing kind of comes out of it, or the implementation doesn't happen, or it gets put into a drawer and yes, we did. How do you stop it from being just that tick the box?
Hayley speaking. I'm happy to start with this one. And I think even sort of going back, the organisations, when they do sort of commit to doing this type of work, that sort of recognising that, like, sort of having that openness to hear that experience and potentially doing things a little bit differently to what they might be used to is the first thing. But some of the things that we've found that are really helpful is having that support from the executive level within organisations. And with that, it helps to be able to prioritise accessibility in terms of staffing, staff resources, but also budget, if there was any budget that was required for that. We do see that organisations will often do these type of reviews and then embed recommendations into whether it's sort of organisational strategies or access and inclusion plans. So then that means that there's a strategic obligation to sort of complete the recommendations that are identified. Another thing to sort of have that governance as well is ensuring that people with disability are embedded in the ongoing review of recommendations. So it might be sharing findings with either disability employee networks, or if you've got any customer advisory networks that include people with disability, and they will be able to help you prioritise which recommendations you should look at first, and then check if they're suitable for people as well. And I'll hand over to Tom if you've got anything to add to that.
Thanks, Hayley. I look, again, I think for me, my learnings over the last 12 months and beyond have been top down, bottom up approach as well. So certainly having a champion or champions at that executive level, and completely agree about building a disability employment network or group. I think one of the stats that I've heard around is in terms of organizations and diversity, disability is considered, but it's one of that's the least considered in terms of intersectionality. It's one of the last things to consider as well, and that's got to change in order for it not just to be a tick box. Intersectionality is probably a key approach as well, in terms of we're all not just one thing. And again, if you look at diversity and inclusion collectively, then you're more likely to get champions and people involved across an organization. Specifically for my work, and this is not a negative, but I often work with property teams and facilities managers. And I'm not saying that's not the right way to look at it, but I often feel that property management and facility managers feel the weight of access and inclusion in terms of certainly the physical space. And one of the things I try and get across is that everyone should be involved across an organization, every department, and all individuals. We extend that to visitors, to customers as well. But trying to spread that responsibility and have those conversations that this is everyone's business, everyone will benefit. and again, for me specifically, not putting all that onto property management, who often then fall back to, well, I've only got a budget for capital works, to this amount, and that's not what this is about. It's about looking at innovation through understanding users and experiences, and coming up with solutions that are going to benefit across the board. So definitely champions, definitely a network, but yeah, make sure that everyone's involved. So yeah, if a report comes back, it doesn't just sit on properties team, put it across all departments, let them participate.
Emma here, that's it's so important, that kind of top down and bottom up approach to really having it access and inclusion embedded across an organisation, and to make sure that things are getting done. As we say with our access and inclusion index, what gets measured gets changed. And once you've done the review, you've measured it, you've considered what's available, you've considered the barriers and potential opportunities for enhancement, then drive that, implement it across the organisation. I want to thank Hayley and Tom for their time this morning. Please reach out to Hayley and Tom, anything around user experience towards Hayley, anything around dignified access towards Tom, and you can reach out to myself, Emma, for anything more broadly as well. Thank you so much. Have a fabulous morning.